Yes,
All right.
please.
Well, everybody, thank you for taking the time. Early morning here in the East Coast, even earlier for the folks who are joining us from the West Coast in the U.S. Crazy time difference for Soran, who's joining us from Tokyo. Big thank you to him. We're gonna talk about the 2025 Shochu Cocktail Competition. The theme this year is being inspired by Japanese art. And there's nobody that is better suited to talk to us about the subject than Soran, and I'll let him introduce himself. So, Soran, if you can just share your background and your the work that you're doing now, and the reason why we brought you on here to talk about shochu and artwork.
Thank you. Hi guys. My name is Soran Nomura. Now I'm based in Tokyo. I had two bars called Nomura Shoten and also Quarter Room. One of the bar Quarter Room is the concept is art and cocktail infusion. So and also we're using like a shochu cocktail as well. So that's why I think Don choose me to hear as well, and it's really appreciated. Thank you. I used to live in London about 7 years. Just beginning was study arts, and after that, I became to bartender. That's my career start. And until now, I've been doing bartending, London, Tokyo, sometimes a little bit of New York as well, but mostly London and Tokyo. Anything else we have to talk about, Toto?
I mean, there's so much, but I'll drag it out of you during the later part. So to just give everybody a quick overview at what's going to happen in the next hour and a half is that I'm going to do a really quick intro to Shochu in case anyone doesn't know what it is to whet your appetite. And for those of you that want to know more, there is a much longer video that I recorded last year that really goes in depth into the entire production process of shochu. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Understanding Shochu. I've created a shortened link here for you if you want to find that. But to kind of give you that really brief understanding of what shochu is, I want to explain it to you when you compare it to other spirits, because for most of us, we get a lot of the other categories, and shochu is very different. So most of the time, when you think about other distilled spirits, we really break it down into these categories. So we talk about where is it from, what is it made from, how is it distilled, and then if there is some kind of maturing process, what kind of wood does it go into, if it goes into oak, and then maybe there's some couple other special things about it. So as an example, whiskey, you could say like it's made in a lot of different places. So are we talking about Scotch? Are we talking about American whiskey, Irish whiskey, Japanese whiskey, right? And all those in each of those different places, they can be made from different things. And we can say, broadly speaking, you're doing a single distillation or a continuous distillation, and then you can talk about the different ways that you do that aging. And so, using this method, we can say like, okay, let's talk specifically about American whiskey, and we're going to only talk about corn and only about single pot distillation, new American oak, and then at a certain proof, we say, okay, that's bourbon, right? In America, you can make it from rye. That's not bourbon. It's a different thing, but here's kind of how we think about this. And we can do the same thing about other categories. Everything else seems to fall neatly into these other categories. However, when it comes to shochu, this, framework of how we think about distilled spirits really doesn't work, because there's something very fundamentally different about shochu. And in this longer video, I'm going to break it down into these categories. So you still have location and ingredient, just like anywhere else, but then you have this thing called koji, which really makes a big difference. And then when we say distillation and shochu, it's also a very different thing. So as a quick overview, in terms of where is shochu made, shochu is really, it comes from Kyushu, which is this orange southern island within the chain of Japan. So most of us, when we think of Japan, maybe you have this vague outline of a bunch of different islands. You probably know that Tokyo is the capital, but most of us don't think about these other islands. And this southern big island in orange on this map, that is Kyushu, and that is where shochu comes from. And there's a very big reason why it comes from there. I go into that in great detail in that longer video, but just understand that that is where shochu comes from. It can come from elsewhere, but it really doesn't. It really just comes from that south. And within that south, there are also geographic indications. So much like champagne has to come from a very specific place, there are specific regional styles that have to be adhered to as well. Not going to be on a test, just know that this exists. much more interestingly, when we're talking about shochu in terms of making cocktails, it can be made from a lot of different things. It can be made from over 30 different ingredients. The most common of them, though, is going to be these. It's rice, barley, sweet potato, buckwheat, and brown sugar. It's really sugar that's just been sugar cane that's been boiled down to the point that it becomes brown and solid. It's not brown sugar in the way that we think of brown sugar for baking in the U.S. But kokuto, it's a black or brown sugar from the even more southern part of Japan. But when we think of that southern island, the different products are made in different parts of the island. Simply the different parts of the island, depending on the climate, because of the topography, whether you're in the mountains or whether it's more flat. If there's more stones, you have different things that grow in different regions, and so those are the different products that grow in these different prefectures. So within this map, you can see these smaller areas with names. Those are prefectures. You can think of them as kind of like states or counties in the United States. They're the smaller governmental designations. And depending on which prefecture, they tend to grow, predominantly these products. They can grow other things. Everyone grows a little bit of everything, but the biggest production tends to be these things within Kyushu. So that gives you the ingredient. Now, the most important thing that really makes shochu is this thing called koji. And people sometimes get scared because they find out that koji is a mold. And when you think of mold in the U.S., you probably think of, oh, it's the thing that you get on your bread and when it goes bad. Well, there's also a good kind of mold, and it's something that you all eat. It's something you probably all already have at home as an ingredient in your refrigerator and your pantry, because most of you probably have soy sauce. Most of you probably have miso. Both of those products are made from koji. Koji is a very special mold, and we talk about it in terms of three different colors. We talk about them in terms of yellow, black, and white in terms of the color of the spores. And depending on the color of the spores, they have different flavor characteristics. And the reason why we use them in shochu production is that unlike making whiskey, where you take something like a barley and you go through a germination or a malting, which allows the grain to start growing and producing the enzyme that converts the starch into sugar, when it comes to shochu, we use the koji mold to produce that amylase enzyme, which cuts the starch into sugar, which then the yeast can eat and turn into alcohol. So koji is the thing that is universal across all of shochu. So whether you're making it of rice, barley, or even sugarcane, which is already sugar, you're still using koji. So that is the unifying thing for the entire category. And the thing that makes it really special and different compared to how it's done, in other categories is that it's this very long, slow, parallel fermentation. So you're both doing the koji part of it as well as the regular yeast part of it at the same time. And by doing it together, you develop these flavors that you really can't from any other fermentation process. And the other thing you get out of koji that you don't get out of just the regular malting process is that it produces an extra enzyme that cuts the proteins down into amino acids. And so that is where you get that umami rich flavor that makes soy sauce and something like miso so savory. And it's something that you find in high concentrations of other foods such as ketchup or Parmesan cheese. It's the thing that makes everything more delicious. It's MSG, right? That is the pure chemical form of it, but this is the natural way that it's formed. It's produced by something like the koji mold. So this is what makes shochu really unique. Now, when it comes to distillation, when it comes in shochu, there obviously is a continuous distillation and single pot distillation, but that's really not what we're here to talk about because continuous distillation, it exists. Most of it is in Japan. None of it really makes it to the U.S. It's really only used in the products that we as fancy cocktail bartenders don't talk about. In the same way that a huge percentage of tequila is actually mixto. Most people in America, when they think about drinking tequila, they're talking about Jose Cuervo. As cocktail bartenders, we don't talk about that. When we say tequila, we're talking about 100% blue agave. And in that same way, when we talk about shochu, obviously it's going to be single distilled, but the two types of distillation is actually atmospheric distillation, which is regular distillation, or it is reduced pressure distillation or vacuum distillation. So every distilled spirit in the world, besides shochu, it mostly is done through atmospheric distillation, meaning it is at atmospheric pressure, the pressure that we all exist in right now. It is regular pressure distillation. However, many of you have heard of a laboratory piece of equipment called a rotovap, a rotary evaporator. That uses vacuum. By producing a vacuum at one end, at the very end of the process, you lower the boiling point. So you can distill, you can boil the alcohol off at a lower temperature. And by doing that, you preserve different flavors. You get to save the light and flowery characteristics that normally would be broken either by the heat or you'd lose it in that high heat process. And you get to save that in using reduced pressure distillation. The downside, though, is that by not doing that higher heat cooking, you don't create other chemicals. So if you kind of think of it as, if you were to char a steak on a charcoal grill, you get, that really deep burn marks, you get that, Maillard reaction, caramelization, versus if you were to make another dish where you didn't do that and let's say you made a braise and you didn't do any of that browning step, both could be delicious, but, in one's way, you would get that high heat caramelization and the other you wouldn't. So when it comes to shochu, you can make that choice between doing a high heat process which allows a richer and more complex thing to come through, a much more oilier texture, a heavier on the from a texture perspective on your tongue, or you can go reduce pressure and come up with something that's much lighter, more perfumey, something that you really get more on your nose than on as a texture on your tongue, and you have these two different things. So besides, you have already 30 different ingredients, and then you have three different kojus you can make it. Now you can put it into two different distillation methods, and that produces widely different things. And the term you may often see in Japanese is joatsu or genatsu, which is atmospheric or reduced pressure distillation. Now, when it comes to proof, something that we don't really talk about, other spirits, they tend to come at whatever proof it comes at. So you either get something at 40% alcohol or 80 proof, or you would get something at higher proof. So when we talk about whiskey, it is normal proof or it is barrel proof, right? Something that is more. When it comes to shochu, it actually happens in the other direction. So the vast majority of the shochu you'll find is actually for Americans what we would consider a lower proof. So it comes in at about 27% alcohol, whereas what we would in the US think of as normal 40% is considered the higher proof version. So if you were looking at label, it's what you would call genshu. So when you find that bottle of shochu, you'll often first be like, "Oh, this is weird. This is a lower proof. Did they make a lower version of it?" Actually, that's the normal version. They intended to make that at 27%. So broadly speaking, shochus, you'll find it at the higher proof for them, regular for us, 40%, maybe 43%, and the vast majority you'll see it at 27%. So again, you go through all of these steps, all these variations, and then you get two different proofs. And depending on which you use, you're going to get a wildly different cocktail. You can obviously imagine that if you use a lower proof thing, you'll get a different kind of cocktail if you were to try to make an old fashioned. It wouldn't give you that punch. However, it really opens the door to make lower ABV cocktails in a way that you couldn't before because you're not just watering something down. At 27%, it is full flavor because most shochis, even at 27%, that is what they're distilled to. So they're not distilling higher and then adding more water to it. That is the proof they're distilling to. They're distilling it to 27%, meaning they are letting it go in the still for much longer to get all of the tails so that you get 27% right off the still. So it is a much more flavorful product than if you were to take something 40 and then just add water to bring it down to 27. Now, this last step, which is other, it could be a lot of different things. So we talked about koji. So it's a mold, but the mold has to grow on something. So you could grow it on the same thing you're making. So if you're making a rice shochu, you can make a rice koji, but you could also make a barley shochu that is, 80% barley, but 20% rice koji. So by adding rice and barley, it's actually not purely a barley shochu, even though we call it a barley shochu. In fact, this is how that kokuto shochu or the sugarcane brown sugar shochu is made. It's made using rice koji for the most part. You could use other kinds of koji. You can make barley koji. You could put koji on pretty much anything. But for products that you're probably most familiar with in the US, as an example, Ichiko, there tends to be the Ichiko silhouette in the more kind of shouldery low bottle, or there's that thinner bottle that we now see in most cocktail bars, Ichiko Saiten. Ichiko Saiten is actually 100% koji. So they take all of the barley and they put all of it through the koji process. Whereas Silhouette is a blend where they take some of it, the barley, through the koji process, and some of it is just regular barley. So there's a huge blending process even in that koji to ingredient ratio and what you're using. And so there's the ingredient and then there's the percentage of it that goes through that koji process. Obviously, when we think of still types in the U.S., we kind of just think about, oh, is it column or is it a single pot? But if you look at the bottom two pictures on the right on the screen, uh, in the middle you have what you may, if you took the bar 5-day class, may know as a Filipino style still or an Asian style still. It is the still that's commonly still used in Oaxaca for a lot of mezcals. Uh, the most famous one you may know is probably the Del Maguey Minero and Pechuga are made through this type of still, where it is a clay vessel, and then above it there is water that is run through some kind of metal bowl that condenses from that clay vessel that is boiling. So in the middle, you have that style of still that is still used in Japan, both historically but still used today. And even weirder, something that I've never seen anywhere else in the world, the picture on the bottom right, that is a horizontal still that has four lin arms coming off the top of it. So instead of having one swan's neck, it has four on a horizontal still. It is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. They do it so that they can maximize the oiliness and they want zero reflux. So if you think of the classic kind of triangular still that most of us think of, the reason why it's that shape is that you want the vapor to go up, recondense, and come back down. So only the cleanest, purest, thinnest vapor makes it to the top and down the lin arm. This, they're like, no, we don't want that. We want everything. Make that wide as possible, make it as near the boiling surface as possible, and get all of it. And one isn't enough. Let's make four of it, and let's make the still horizontal. Truly bizarre, makes a crazy product unlike anything else. Um, so still types, every distillery makes their own still. They customize their own still. It's not like going to Scotland where every still looks the same. Every still in every distillery is completely unique. It's whatever parts they had, whatever person that was putting it together, and whatever crazy fixes and patches they had to do over the years. Everything looks completely different. Um, Besides that, there's an entire blending process that really doesn't get talked about very much. But after it's made, it goes through a resting process or aging process, maturation process. The two pictures above on the right side is a distillery where they're aging in clay vessels in a cave. This was a bomb shelter at one point. It's a large cave system. There's another distillery that uses an abandoned gold mine. It is miles deep, and you have to take a train to go down it. It is an interesting ride if you ever visit the distillery to see all this shochu being aged deep underground. The middle picture is that kokuto shochu, that sugarcane shochu from Amami Island, way in the south. And the little black things on that stainless steel tank, those are all speakers. They go through an acoustic sonic aging process where they have different playlists, mostly classical music, that they play the shochu through the entire resting or aging process. So there's a lot of weird stuff that happens besides the main stuff that happens. So shochu is this crazy category, and for those of you that are taking screenshots, this is the one that you're probably going to want to remember. Here's all the different things that you need to take into consideration when you're like, hey, which shochu do I want to pick? It's not just I'm going to use a rice shochu, a barley shochu. You also need to decide I'm going to use what kind of koji, what kind of distillation method, what kind of proof, and is there some other weird thing that I don't know about it that I should look into as well? So it is a crazy category. It's so much fun. You never stop tasting something new because somebody's making something new and somebody's doing something ancient that they're redoing. It is such a crazy history. And if you really want to learn more, watch this longer video where I go really in depth into each of those steps, and you can see why. One way of thinking about shochu is to think of it in terms of Pokemon. If you were ever wondered, what kind of alcohol does Professor Oak drink versus Professor Birch, I can tell you for a fact that Professor Birch drinks shochu and Professor Oak drinks sake. And there's a reason for this. And if you watch that longer video, you can understand shochu in terms of Pokemon. Now, back to why we're really here. We're here to talk about art and shochu. So, in terms of art and shochu, I really want to start by just saying, hey, in any cocktail, whether you're thinking about it from art or not, we really need to do three different things. And you need to have some kind of inspiration. So, why am I making this drink? And it may be something as dumb as your boss told you to put a drink on the menu. It may be as simple as I want to win this Shochu cocktail competition. But there's a reason why you're doing it, and you're going to need some point of inspiration, something to start with. What are you trying to accomplish with this thing? And for us today, we're going to talk deeply about that art. But just as important is going to be the next step, which is once you have that seed of an idea of what you want to create, you need to actually make a recipe. And this is something that's often overlooked. You say, okay, I've got an ingredient that has inspired me, and now everything is easy. I'm just going to plug it into a classic recipe formula that I know. I already have the ratios, and then I have my recipe. But it's much more complicated than that. And the best cocktails go through a long developmental process where you try different spirits, you try different ingredients, you try to really perfect the exact recipe. And it is probably the place where most cocktails go astray. You may have a great idea, but then if you don't go through that rigorous development process, your recipe, to put it simply, too sweet, too bitter, it's not balanced. Something is not right about it. You know, if you made a little tweak, this would probably be a winning drink. And often in all the cocktail competitions I've judged, not just the shochu ones, we have cocktails that come up where you're like, this could have been great. This could have won, but there's something that's not right about it that could have been fixed in that development step, and it's just not there. So, an important part of it that we'll talk about today as well. And the last step, which most people really neglect, is the fact that once you've gone through the hard work of coming up with an idea and making a delicious drink, you got to do something with it. And for most of us, we need to sell it. We need to put it on the menu, and it's got to actually sell. And no matter how good your drink is, once it hits the menu, if nobody orders it, then what's the point? It's the tree that fell in the woods that nobody heard, right? You need to make a drink that is going to translate to sales, that's going to translate to people not only wanting to get it from your bar, but hopefully request it at other bars. When we talk about modern classics and drinks that transcend the one bar that they're at, they're the drinks that are made everywhere. So the thing that makes something like a penicillin a modern classic is not the fact that the balance was good or the inspiration was good, but it's the fact that it is reproducible in a lot of different places. It has a very simple list of ingredients that most of us probably have anyways, and is something that has that draw where someone who tried it once, if you were lucky enough to go to the original Milk and Honey and had Sammy make it for you, then every bar afterwards you go to, whether you're in Singapore or you're in Idaho, you're like, hey, can you make me a penicillin, right? And that kind of draw, that how do I translate this into something that's going to have staying power, not just in my bar, but it's actually going to be requested in other bars, is something that we don't talk about and think about deeply enough. And part of that, for specifically this, in terms of a cocktail competition, is you need to make something that you can then present to a judge. How are you going to talk about this to people? How are you going to do this pitch essentially when you make this drink in front of people and have them understand why you made it, what your inspiration was, how you went through that process, and then ultimately pick it among all the other cocktails they're going to taste and say that this is the one that should win. And if you're not thinking about that from the beginning, you're probably not going to win. And that's how you make a award-winning cocktail, and specifically one that's going to win the Shochu Cocktail Competition. So we're going to talk about all of this, but the place we're going to start is art. And something that you probably didn't think you were going to talk about and think about in today's seminar is, what is art? Because, if we're going to be inspired by art, we need to first think about what it is and what it can do. Like, why are we asking you to make a cocktail inspired by art? What can you get out of this? And for most of us, when we think of, like, art with a capital A, something that that is in a museum, something that's on a pedestal, you may think of something like this, right? This is something that we all know. This is the statue of David. It's supposed to be this, this ideal version of beauty or whatever you want to think about it. It is something that we literally put on a pedestal and we say, this is art. Let us all come and worship this. Put it in the center of the room. Everyone behold, capital A art. But that's not the only way that we encounter art in the world. And I perhaps think the most interesting form of art isn't this kind of art, but it's the more subversive kind of art. And when we say we're going to make a cocktail, if we were to compare this to the classics of cocktail, perhaps this is something like an old fashioned or a daiquiri. It's on the pedestal. It's the big one that we all know. But more interesting perhaps, and something that we can actually do, because let's be honest, until you're dead and it's been around for 1,000 years and it is that classic, we're not talking about that. We're talking about what we can do today. What is something in today that we can do that is interesting to us, that's going to be something that we talk about as a community, as people who are interested in cocktails, and perhaps has a little bit of subversive element to it. And so maybe you think of something instead of a beautiful statue, but something like this. And for those of you that don't know, this is a urinal, and quite literally, it was a piece of trash. And to put it on a and it was actually just a beam of wood, but a pedestal, if you will. And to call it art was something that was incredibly audacious. And for some of you may be like, clearly that is not art. That is actually literal trash. I literally will urinate on this. This is not art. But this is something that shook the art world. To say, here's a found object that I can turn into art by my sheer will as an artist, by me putting it on a pedestal and forcing you to look at it and consider it, I have transformed this into art. And we may now that this has been an accepted piece of high art in the canon of modern art, accept this. Maybe today we're like, yeah, if you duct tape a banana to a wall, is that art? Many of us may say that's not art, that's really bullshit, but it does have that same element of subversive and just kind of boldness to say, I as an artist am saying this is art, and I'm forcing you to confront this, whether you agree or disagree. I am saying this is art, and I want you to engage with this and ask that question of, is this art? So how does this, how what does this do? What can art do? And whether it's a urinal or it's a beautiful marble statue, what can it do? And I've done a much longer seminar about this, but for the brevity to get to the shochu part of this, I think it can do two things. I'm also went to art school. The thing that it can do is it can teach you something new. And maybe in the case of the urinal, the thing that it teaches you new is, hey, I need to look at the world with fresh eyes because anything can be art. I had not considered this possibility before. This is something that is wildly new. Obviously, marble statue made by one of the great artists that even has a Ninja Turtle named after them. That is art. But is a urinal upside down on a pedestal art? That taught me something new. For the most part, art doesn't do that. Art actually does something much more common, which is that art it reminds you of something that you already know. And this, is something that we in the cocktail world perhaps don't think enough about, because this is also something that we can do in cocktails. And so some of you may have already heard this talk. Some of you are like, what the hell is he talking about? And I'm going to talk about one of my favorite films of all time, the Pixar movie Ratatouille from 2007. And for those of you that have never seen this movie, I'm sorry, but I'm going to spoil this entire movie for you. So real quick, it's about a rat in Paris who wants to be a chef, and he somehow can magically control this bungling chef by moving his hair, and by using this guy as his avatar, he's able to become a chef. And long story short, there's an evil critic. Evil critic comes to try this rat's food, and he's served ratatouille, considered a peasant dish. And even though he's there to hate on it, he has this amazing moment, and it reminds him of something. It reminds him of a moment when he had gone out and hurt himself playing outside, and his mother gave him a peasant dish, something that he ate at home, and it made him happy. And by having that reminder, and by being reminded of something he already knew, it gives him an emotional moment. And food can do that, and obviously cocktails can do that as well. So by trying to remind somebody of something they already know, we can produce an emotional reaction in somebody, which is what art does. So when you listen to music and it reminds you of your first heartbreak, that emotion that you can only get by listening to something that reminds you of something you already know, we can perhaps also do that when it comes to cocktails. And perhaps the easiest way we can do that is by being inspired by art that already does that. So when we think about Ratatouille, we can think about, or any piece of art, we can think about it as what new thing is it teaching us? What thing we already know is it reminding us of? And it's that emotional epiphany that we're looking for. Um, as a quick aside, the thing you should not take away from Ratatouille is that it's not how to pass a health exam by taking the health inspector and locking him into a walk-in. That is the thing you should not learn as a new thing from Ratatouille. It's the reminding you of something you already know. And this is something that Pixar does. It is the reason why Pixar has universal appeal. In all of their movies, there's something uplifting that it reminds you of, something mostly about your family, something about your childhood, something that we all aspire to, some sense of nostalgia, right? It is something that we find in the best of movies. So, how can we do that same thing? And how can we use that inspiration and translate that to something in a cocktail? So, the cocktail you probably all know me the best as is probably the Benton's Old Fashioned, which is the bacon old fashioned. I think this is a dumb drink. It has universal appeal because everyone likes bacon. So it's successful in that sense. But as a concept, it's really kind of dumb because at the end of the day, bacon doesn't really have an emotional tie. It doesn't remind you, it doesn't have the gravity of that first heartbreak, right? You're just like, I like bacon. Breakfast. Who doesn't like bacon, right? It's good in that it's successful. Everyone likes it. It's on a lot of other people's menus. I'm proud of it, but it's not the thing that I think is actually critically interesting in that, what can we do as art and cocktails. The drink that I think I've done that is the most successful is the cinema highball, which is a butter and popcorn infused rum and coke. So it's a rum and coke that is popcorn and butter, and it tastes like going to the movie theaters. Whether you know what it is when you order it, or you just give it to somebody blind, every guest I've served this to, they drink it and they're like, it reminds me of the movie theater. And the reason I think this is a more interesting drink in that having an emotional experience is because movies are a universal thing. We all have been to the movie theater. By showing you this picture of popcorn and Coca-Cola, you've probably all seen that ad before the movie that's like, let's all go get a snack, and it's the dancing popcorn and the Coke. You all know what this means. Anytime you've walked by a movie theater and you smell popcorn, you're like, oh, I just want to go eat popcorn and drink Coca-Cola and go to the movie theater. It's a place we've all been, and we've been to it at all parts of our life. You've been to it as a child, and it's been the scary thing that you had to hold your parents' hand to get through the scary parts and you didn't want to look at. It's the thing where you were like, I'm going to cut classes and go with my friends, and it's exciting because you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. It's a thing where you held hands with on your first date with somebody, and you're like, oh, is this somebody that I'm actually going to have a relationship with? It's a thing that you someday perhaps will take your own children to. There are so many emotions, and that's not even talking about the emotions that are on the screen. When you're watching a movie that's action and it gets your heart pumping, or as a horror and makes you scared, a romance that brings tears to your eyes, there's so many emotions that are part of a movie theater that we all independently have, that's unique to us. We each have that, that's different. What I think of the movie theater is different from what you think of the movie theater. Yet we all have this shared experience, and somehow popcorn and Coca-Cola is the food and drink that we think of unconsciously when we think of movie theaters. So by putting it into a cocktail, rum and Coke, thing that already goes together, popcorn and Coke already goes together, popcorn and butter already goes together, butter and rum goes together. It's this weird Venn diagram of things that all go together. So it works, and it also can give somebody an emotional moment by having them consume this thing and remind them of something that they already know. So, in terms of shochu, then, a cocktail that I did that I think tries to do this to better or worse is a cocktail where my inspiration for this drink was roasted sweet potatoes. And this is the Asian sweet potato, the Japanese sweet potato. It's not the orange yam that, or when we think of candied sweet potatoes, as Thanksgiving in the U.S., that's actually a completely different root vegetable. So the sweet potato in Asia is a common thing you see in the winter, where you'll literally find old people, old like metal contraptions where they're burning wood to do this, and it's usually some like old grandmother that's doing this. It might be a very modern a car that's doing it from the back with an electric setup with a loudspeaker that's saying, "Come get sweet potatoes, come get sweet potatoes." It can be anything, but in Asia, this is a common thing, whether you're in China, Korea, or Japan, in the winter, when you walk down the street, you'll often get the smell of roasted sweet potatoes. So unfortunately, in the US, it doesn't really translate because we don't have that experience. But in Asia, this is an experience that many people have. And immediately you have that sensory, memory of sweet potatoes. So I wanted to tap into this and I wanted to make a cocktail. And the reason I wanted to do this because sweet potato is one of the most common ingredients for making shochu. And in doing this, I wanted to use the production process of shochu to make a cocktail. So instead of just making that cocktail, I wanted to make that cocktail using koji. So, as I said before, koji is how we turn starch into sugar to make alcohol for shochu. Well, what if I used koji in the same way that sweet potato shochu manufacturers you do that process to turn the starch into sugar, but I don't add yeast? I can make a sweet potato syrup that is intensely roasted sweet potato flavored, and then I can put those things together to make a cocktail. So that was my inspiration in making this cocktail. Was I started with sweet potato koji. How am I going to put these things together? And then the next step in the process was the recipe development. And so for shochu cocktails, you obviously need to find a shochu. And so in trying a lot of different shochus, I decided to use this genshu. So this is a higher proof shochu. This is the Satsuma Kurodashi, and it is a sweet potato shochu, and it has a lot of texture to it. So even though it's not aged in wood, it has a lot of body to it. And I thought that I could use this in the same way that we use whiskey in an old fashioned to try to make an old fashioned style cocktail. Now, in doing this, the next step, which I say that many of us forget, is this sales part of this. So if I made a drink that was sweet potato flavored using sweet potato shochu, and that was it, and I called it something like an old fashioned, it wouldn't look like an old fashioned because it wouldn't be brown. It's clear, it'd be maybe a little murky because I used the sweet potato syrup. It doesn't scream old fashioned. If people see it being passed on a tray, goes by their table, no one's going to say, "I want that. What is that?" They're just going to be like, "That's a weird kind of cloudy thing in a rocks glass. I don't know what that is. That's not interesting." So a lot of us, unfortunately, have been swayed by the promise of interesting uh, by butterfly pea flower. I personally hate butterfly pea flower. It makes a beautiful color, but I think it is a stupid ingredient because it doesn't taste like anything. If I wanted something to be purple, I would just use food coloring. Butterfly pea flower adds no flavor. It makes the cocktail cost more, and it actually is a misunderstanding of what this ingredient is. So there is often this the game of telephone that happens when it comes to techniques, where a interesting technique comes up, and then over time people forget why it was interesting, and they just keep doing the thing because they think it looks good, and it eventually becomes like an Instagram thing. So the problem with butterfly pea flower is that the interesting part of it is that butterfly pea flower changes color when the acid changes. So if you were to take butterfly pea flower and you add more acid to it, it changes between purple and blue. So in theory, you could make a color changing cocktail by slowly adding acid to it. Or if you were to freeze lemon juice into an ice cube and put it into a butterfly pea flower cocktail, and as the ice cube dilutes, it would change colors. That's mind blowing. That's amazing. But nobody does that because we've all forgotten what the point of butterfly pea flower is. It's the fact that it changes color. In fact, now the only thing we know is that where it's purple or blue, we want that color, so we use it like food coloring. Just use food coloring. Don't use butterfly pea flower. To me, thinking of butterfly pea flower and thinking that it's going to be this amazing thing is like looking at this Duchamp, like, this masterpiece and saying, ooh, masterpiece. Okay, moral of the story, I need to find broken urinals. It's worth a fortune. I'm gonna just put this all over my house. No, that's not the point. The point is that he was the first to do it. Anyone else who does it after it is just plagiarism and it makes no sense. You've lost the thread of why the artwork was originally interesting. So I want to make something that's going to sell. How do I make a cocktail that has the visual appeal of butterfly pea flower, but stays true to the inspiration and the process of what I'm trying to do? Well, it happens to be easy because there is something called a purple sweet potato. It's called a Murasaki sweet potato. It is bright purple. So by taking purple sweet potatoes and going through the same process that I was going to do anyways, I was able to make a purple drink called purple, and I can do a that visually stunning drink where when you see it go by, you're like, "What is that? I want to know what that tastes like." And everyone wants to order this thing, and so I can hit all three of those steps and try to make a successful drink where it has an interesting inspiration. It went through a development process to try to tighten it and make it delicious, and then at the end, it is something that is reproducible at scale. I can make a lot of this at a bar. And because all the infusion happens up front, it's something that, from a service perspective, only takes a couple of minutes. And it is something that people want to buy because it looks beautiful. So when it comes to shochu, the master of doing this inspiration and inspiration specifically from art into a shochu cocktail is actually Soran. So I'm going to throw this now to Soran, and he's going to talk about one of his cocktails, and we're going to grill him about his process in making art and shochu cocktails. So Soran, if you could first tell us a little bit more about Porter Room and
Yep,
the things that you've done in the past and about this cocktail specifically.
sure. So, we actually so basically we choose our our classic cocktail with art. It's actual we pick up classic cocktail and also when they invent it. So like for example, like aviation about 1900 they invented. So we picked up the exactly same year art and artists. And what if those classic cocktail inspiration from those arts would be like this? That's our kind of classic cocktail recipe came up. And then I always look at the art and also the color and the ink transform to taste. That's kind of my always interesting part. And also the how they drew or how they make it, and then I trying to add it kind of texture of I mean taste as well, but the brassing we always do brassing like a white chocolate or we using bamboo cha mixed with something like a black chocolate as well, and then black color brassing or easily we can make it. So we try to do that as well, and then especially shochu side, we always choose Japanese artists. And this time, so la 2 months ago, we went to the shochu trip with the Don, and we made some shochu cocktails. And by the time my part is Kokuto Shochu, which is from Amami Island, and then they making it by sugarcane sugar. There is one person, really famous artist called Ison Tanaka. He's he was been what can I say? Like he's been doing some works and different cities, but the his end of his life is always he really wants to be like Amami Oshima. So he's Amami Islander. So that's why the I really want to pick up his art for Kokuto Shochu. And this art is actually Adan Seaside, which is his one of those of his famous arts. And when I look at this one, it's just like green and then yellow and something like I can choose with a kind of slightly different color as well, like kind of brownish. So we try to choose okay, what did I make? Can you pat next to the recipe as well? Yeah. So this is the Benisango is 40% kind of high proof as shochu side, but I kind of like the blend it with the shochu. It's kind of next stage, maybe next stage or like not a fast stage of shochu cocktails, but um, because those two the why we blend it as you guys know about the double splits kind of same the idea from and and also I like the this high proof drink but I want to drink like as much as I can I mean I want to order it like three or four or five but if it's really strong I just want to have just only one which is not like the point so the Benisango is actually like a 40%. And I added the kotsuru. It's called banana. It's actually really like a banana flavor made by sweet potato shochu. I think it says they making distillation as also the fermentation process is different. And they had literally the fresh banana flavor. It's better than like you using the banana baked banana syrup whatsoever. And the reason why I use that banana equal yellow, it's kind of similar. And also the tree is it's not banana tree, but it's when I see it first time, it looks like banana trees. And then also like it's south of Japan, so it could be they have banana tree. So I just oh maybe that's good idea. And also the flavor, I mean the flavor of banana flavor is actually really good the Kokuto as well. And next one is Kokuto de Liqueur. Maybe you don't have it, but it's Kokuto Liqueur by the rum in Okinawa island. And it's of then that's just the taste notes is actually really good because the Kokuto with the Kokuto shochu obviously is fine, and then it's Kokuto with banana is really nice. So this process is kind of my taste the kind of uh making this the way. And then I added because these trees are kind of a sweeter side, so but I want kind of bitter and also like diluted something. So I added a Fernet Branca. It seems like kind of Negroni or hanky panky style, but it's actually quite like the Negroni with the kind of with the tea. So that's what I use in this one osmanthus oolong tea, which is from Taiwan. And then it's actually really nice to dilute it uh with the alcohol already because shochu how to drink a shochu there's one way to do it like maewari it's before you drink they already mix with the water and the reason why I do that because one, it's actually like a reduce down the alcohol percent. Yes. Second is actually alcohol and water combined together really well. It's not like shaking. It's not like stir. And I mean, instantly like the combined together. Better than the kind of connection with the water and the alcohol. And one thing I want to tell you about the shochu, I think the shochu has shochu's uniqueness is I think the water. Adding water is actually flavor and the taste kind of different, slightly different, and also like when you taste it at the end, it's really long. So please try the added water or hot water. There's the oyuwari. It's actually adding hot water, but it's really tastes different, and also how the smells coming out is different as well, especially sweet potato. Sorry, just a little bit is going on the wrong side, but what I want to tell you because the tea is actually like a flavor water if you think about it. then it's adding the water instead of it flavoring water. You can get a more complex of a taste of cocktail. So that's why my idea is like strong like sweetness and also bitterness is there, and also the tea, adding tea and getting down the low ABV drink. But you have actually like shochu flavor and also the as compress of cocktails what you want to do. So that's why I made those cocktails this time. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit
Mm.
more about the process, but before we
Yeah.
leave this specific drink, so
Mm.
uh, so Soren and I did this seminar together in Japan, and we served cocktails. I served the purple drink, and this was the drink that you served. And before the seminar happened, I saw the order list. So I didn't have a recipe. I just had the list of ingredients that each of the
Mm.
participants were using. And I saw your list, and I was like, I have no idea what kind of cocktail this is, because I'm like, okay, so I know it's a kokoto, so
Yeah.
a brown sugar
Mm.
shochu, which some people may be like, okay, it's kind of more similar to a rum. So okay,
Hmm.
maybe he's going in a rum direction. So he's got a banana liqueur. So okay, rum and banana, very common. Is this a tiki drink? And then I was like, okay, but it's got a brown sugar liqueur. So like maybe he's going more old fashioned like. And then like Fernet, I'm like, okay, this I don't know how this fits in. Is it more because I didn't know what the balance was. I'm like, is this minty? Is that more Negroni? So
Yeah.
when you look at for most people when they look at a menu, right? And so they're coming to your bar. Okay, I know Sauron's bar. I know he's
Mm.
inspired by art. So I'm already thinking of this painting, right? And I see this list of ingredients. What do you think most people are thinking about before they order? They're like, in that same way, they're like, what kind of drink is this? How would you describe this, to make somebody want to order it?
Mm. I think if we doing that as well, but we always giving the kind of artist art that actually is photo. And when we talk about these drinks, actually like I don't like what I was talking about is I like this kind of drink, but I want to low ABV style. That's why I using this and this as well. And it's actually like it's nice to say like a low ABV for the Japanese people quite few times. I mean, yeah, that is the good because they drink maybe one for strong cocktail or maybe a few cocktails for low ABV cocktail for a few drinks, which is better for them. So what I do, I always explain my cocktails as actually like the artist and also the why do you make it is slightly explain as well. And then they once you saw this photo, they always kind of photo and also the ingredients together is actually really uh kind of little bit understanding. Maybe this kind of color coming or this kind of flavor coming. That's why they ordered it for us.
Mhm. So for for folks in the U.S., you kind of glossed over that in Japan, the classic way of drinking
Mm.
shochu, right, for most people, is to have it with water. So whether it's room temperature water, carbonated water, or with hot water. Mostly for older folks, it's that hot water style, right? And just for people to understand, when we say they're adding water, it's not like when whiskey drinkers in America are adding a splash to open it up. This is
Hmm.
mostly water. So this is like
Yeah.
1-to-1 or more like a 5-to-2 or 5-to-3. It's mostly water. You're really
Mm.
diluting this out, right? And so when if you were to describe this to somebody in Japan,
Mhm.
would you tell them that like, hey, this is actually more like a mizuwari or like oiwari,
Mm.
and say that like, hey, this is that kind of low ABV style.
It does, but one thing interesting about a part of shochu is, well, maybe I said that before, but when you added water, its flavor is comes up better than any like spirits. That's what I feel. And then it's actually really works in hot water because warm, it makes really smells because the maybe like a Stone told me that when he was talking about this pot still type, so they want to leave it the oil into the spirits, which doesn't do any whiskey, rum, tequila whatsoever because they want to clear spirits. That's what Don told me. Yeah, and then that's true as well. But the oil themselves is actually hot water, and also koji as well. Koji actually really affects the water as well. And then the flavor, much more high. I mean, like, you can feel it more better than actually straight. And also, I haven't really tried it, but my friends told me that if it's low ABV, like I think there's 20% of shochu as well. Even though they added water, flavor, much flavorful drink comes up. So that's what, yeah.
It would be really interesting to do a tasting where instead of the traditional way of tasting it neat,
Mm,
we taste it with a lot of water just to,
yeah.
to see what that's like. Because I think that's the thing that a lot of people struggle with in the US when I look at
Mm,
the past competitions is because you're like, okay, I'm locked into this idea of classic ratios, and
mm,
you're like, I'm expecting it to be 2 ounces of 40% ABV, and it doesn't work. You're like, how do I make a cocktail when it's 27%? But as you're saying that it's actually better if you lower it even more. So even
hmm
with a 20% ABV shochu, you're saying that if I dilute it, it's like 2 to 1 and
hmm
make it, add even more water, bring it down to 5% alcohol, that will be more flavorful and really open up that shochu more than at that 20%.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, and also like how to make it as well, like if it's black koji or white koji, and also joatsu, atonfie, or like paper, I mean like genatsu. It's really interesting to you not understand how to make it, and then you can really choose to a cocktail as well. Even if I said, I mean, dilution as well, but of course, a high purif is easy to make it because you can it's doesn't breaking down alcohol anyway, so that's why you can make as a classic cocktail. But its uniqueness is actually 25% or a low ABV to be a cocktail, which is the quite harder, but actually like water or tea, flavored water. You can use any type of water, and also the adding slightly like a sweetness, and then you just make it cocktails kind of easily. That's gonna be doing it. Been making cocktail with the shochu. I understood. I mean, I learned it from.
That's really interesting because I've never done that method, but I really want to try now because for most of us, we think that okay, if I use sugar, I need to balance it with acid, but
Hmm
you didn't add any acid, and you're just taking the acid from the spirit itself, and you're not adding lemon juice or lime juice to balance that sweetness, and you're
mm
balancing it with just more dilution. So
Yeah.
that's super interesting. Um, so real quick, because we've hit the hour mark, in case some of you need to run away, we're going to keep talking. But there was a question that came up earlier asking about
Yeah.
that Joatsu versus Genatsu. And so the question, I'm just going to read it out loud, is for Joatsu versus Genatsu, is there typically a proof that they like to sit at? So they said that I imagine Joatsu, since it uses high heat, it's a higher proof Genshu. Is that not the case? So I think the question is about the distilled product and not about making a cocktail with this. So whether it is using low pressure or high pressure, you can distill it to any proof, but uh, for the most part, and I don't think this is because of anything intrinsic to the method itself, but more the flavor profile that the customers are looking for. So just to give a background, even more background, historically, obviously, vacuum distillation didn't exist, right? So vacuum distillation, much more modern, and it is more modern palate is looking for that lighter flavor. So if you were to think about like what your Japanese grandfather is looking for, they're looking for more of that oily style, and a a modern business person, male or female, if they were having a shochu, they're probably looking for a lighter, flowery flavor. And for the most part, those products, for whatever reason, is sold at a lower proof. There's nothing that says that you have to do that. And I think it's more market driven than that the distilled product wants to be at a specific place to answer that question. Soran, do you find that genatsu versus joatsu is particularly better or worse at a genshu or a lower proof?
I think not much different. I mean, it's it's just be yeah, that's just kind of how to make it process anyway. But for the cocktails, it's kind of for me, it's so many different repertory of types. So I think it's just, yeah, as Don said, that Joatsu is more like for me like powerful. Genatsu is more like a cleaner, and also there's one point is the yeast as well. Like if you use a ginjo yeast with a genatsu, it's more cleaner, and you can feel more ginjo flavor, which is sake flavor. So you just look at it like just taste it. I think that's the way to understand. It's just really harder, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's a real struggle to for especially for those in the U.S. because
Mm,
we and this is something that it's going to sound weird. It's actually even hard in Japan. If you're in Tokyo,
yeah,
you don't have access to a lot of shochu because most of it doesn't leave Kyushu, that southern
yeah.
island. So you really have to go to Kyushu to have all the varieties. But besides everything I even talked about in terms of how to classify it, as Soran is saying, that you can use a different kind of yeast, and different producers will say I used a sake yeast or I used a beer
Mm,
yeast, and that will make a very different flavor as well.
mhm,
So I would say that just in general, in the US especially, at the
mm,
moment, we're so limited in terms of what we can get academically. Just obviously you want to learn as much as possible, but
mm,
the reality is that like your distributor has what they have and they
mm,
actually only have what they have in stock. So like you're not going to be able to get everything. So you're rather than thinking like, I'm going to choose from all the options, especially for this contest or just but in general for your bar, I would look
yeah.
at more like what can I get actually in my bar? And then, what does that want to be rather than be like, okay, I'm going to start with this,
Mhm,
high concept. I want a this yeast, this thing, and to try to get to it. So I'm going to read some more questions for folks who need to get the questions out, but we'll continue talking about art and cocktails when the questions run out. So next question was outside of I assume this year, is there another criteria with the art that you choose for your cocktail pairing? So um, uh, the other is it has to be Japanese art. So if you come with a Liechtenstein, then you're going to be disqualified. It's got to be a Japanese artist. It doesn't have to be visual art. It doesn't have to be a painting. It could be a photo. It could be a sculpture. It could be other forms of art. We actually both came up with a list of artists that we would recommend folks look at. Obviously, it has to be shochu, but besides that, I would say like, you will be inspired by what you're going to be inspired by. I'm not going to try to limit you. The one thing I would suggest is that try to be inspired by like the actual Japanese thing and not something derivative from it. So like if you want to be inspired by anime, more power to you, but I suggest you try to find it, in the subtitled form that is as close to the real source material and not a dubbed thing that was edited for American TV, as an example, right? So try to find as close as possible. You don't have to learn Japanese
mhm.
to do it, but try to find something as close to the source material that you can get to. Other questions: what are other shochu properties that you can balance with dilution instead of another flavor profile, like the example with acidity? So,
Oh,
Soran, when we think about shochu and we think about flavors, I think one of
mhm,
the two obvious things that come
mhm.
up is what is the ingredient and what is the koji, right?
Yeah.
So do you find that certain ingredients or certain kojis balance better or worse from dilution?
It's really hard to tell, but sweet potato base is actually good with warm water and also water as well as barley shochu too. I think rice shochu is a bit difficult to find out too, but I think it's the rice shochu has rice koji and then rice base, so it's more like cleaner and then uh easy to mix with kind of different flavor. That's what kind of if I make a cocktail with the rice shochu. But again, it's if it's joatsu and different flavor, maybe good with the water as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of yeah.
I think that the if I had to kind of generally think about this, and not just dilution, but other ingredients as well, I would
Mm,
say that uh, in anything, not just shochu, you either want to, it's that compare or contrast. So you want to be like, look how similar or different it is, right? Is it similar? Is it very different? So you can go the route of like, oh, look, here are flavors that go well together already, and you're gonna, you already think to mix. And then there's the things that you're like, oh, look how different they are and how they happen to go well together, and you didn't think that they would mix, right? So maybe you're like, from a shochu more specific perspective, you're like, okay, well, um, sweet potato shochu tends to be more rich and heavy flavor. Rice
mhm,
shochu happens to be tends to be more lighter flavor. So using that as an example of like something that is stronger and something that is lighter, you can say, okay, so with a strong flavor, I'm going to pair it with a strong flavor so that you can see like how these two things, fight. Or
mhm,
you can say like, I can take something strong and something light and be like, oh, can you taste how subtle this light thing is next to this strong thing? And similarly with the rice shochu, because it's so delicate, you're like, can I balance how delicate it is with the strong flavor, but you
mhm,
still understand that it's a rice shochu, or do you lose the rice shochu? Or do I need to give it something equally light so that they stay light together? So that's kind of what I would suggest in all cocktails is,
mhm.
are you doing a compare or are you doing a contrast?
It all depends on the concept, but I think I'm always go to the kind of heavy, like just a strong flavor, because it's easy to kind of find out the taste good. If it's compare, I think it's a little bit harder to find because it's really sensitive. Because if it's different amounts of different ingredients, and then maybe gonna go to the wrong flavor. So
Mm.
fastable, I think it's the yeah, there's a strong flavor and a strong flavor, and then I'm trying to breaking down a little bit by one by yeah.
Yeah. All right. So next question we have back to atmospheric versus reduced pressure distillation. Does it make sense to blend both to achieve different flavors? Um, I would say that, in general, sure you could,
Mhm,
but I think you would lose both. If you were to mix the two, I'm not saying you can't do it. I would be hard pressed to think of an example where you could taste both the like reduced pressure and atmospheric pressure distillationness of it in one cocktail, because you're then going to add a bunch of other stuff to it. So if that's the hill you want to die on, you can try. But I even mixing two shochus, you can do it, but I wouldn't do it because of the distillation type. I would do it because of the ingredient type or the proof even. Maybe
mm,
you mix a low proof and a high proof to get something, but like I wouldn't think to mix the distillation type. I don't know about you.
mm. Same as me. I think the maybe pressure distillation is gonna be gone flavor, and that's why my side because I did the hyper 40% and also like a 25 and also the banana flavor. That's why it works. But oh, yeah, so that's why it works. But yeah, this distillation time is not gonna be hard to tell.
Do you do a lot of like mixed shochu blends in a cocktail?
This is not like a fast time. Yes. We're doing kinda. I like the actually banana flavor, so that's why I do one with the flavor, the kind of flavor shochu, and then different shochu.
Right.
Uh, for example, dayame, it has a
Hmm.
lychee flavor. So just a little bit of dayame and then mix with fresh like lychee or like white flower notes into the onto the cocktails, and then the other side of different like shochu as a base.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, Dayame is a
Oh,
more
sorry.
recent product that's come out, and it if you were to blind taste it, you would say that it's a liqueur. You'd be like, "Oh, this is like Saint Germain." It's so much like on the nose. It I I struggle to even call it a shochu because of how strongly flavored it is. Um, I was quite suspicious of what they were doing to get it that way. I've been told various things about how they do it. I'm not sure for certain how they do it. But even with that, I would, yeah, like you, I would almost use it like Saint Germain as a modifier instead of the
Mm,
base because of how strong it is. And specifically for this competition, if the drink doesn't scream, "This is a shochu drink," you will not win. Like if I taste it and I mostly get tequila because you did a split base, then like you're not going to win. So if you want it to taste like shochu, you have to use a lot of shochu. And if you did 2 ounces of dayame, it would taste almost too liqueur and not shochu enough. I would personally think. Um, but split bases with shochu certainly good way to go. Soran, do you find that in terms of other spirits, does
yeah.
shochu and other spirits go well together in particular? Is there like a pairing that you like as a split base?
Oh, I think I've done it, but it's always high proof shochu using a high proof shochu. Otherwise, it's just like those flavor shochu. I could that, but any other shochu is kind of hardly put together. That's my
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't get the flavored shochus here, so
Mm,
it's hard for us to do it.
yeah.
All right, next question coming to you. The Adan Seaside, is it hot or cold?
It's cold. It's on the rock style.
Yeah. Uh,
So that's one thing in the beginning I might said that the kind of Negroni or Hanky Panky doesn't get there on the rocks, but if you think the Fernet Branca into the cocktails and as sweet as Swiss vermouth instead of cocktail liqueur, and then you feel kind of understand how taste going to be. So, but yeah, it's cool.
mhm. So question, do any shochu producers combine atmospheric and reduced pressure distillation to make a blend? The answer is yes. I don't know all of them. I can only think of one of them. Unfortunately, there is such little information out there. I think that at least US distributors are understanding that we as bartenders like the more information you can give us. So they've become better about putting information on the website. But if you go to like the distiller's website, there's almost no information, So we try to ask everybody like like what's in the bottle, right? Like what's the ingredient, what is the distillation method, what is the koji, and for most in the US now you can get that information. But when it comes to like more specific information, like what percentage of it is koji versus not koji, what is the koji ingredient, unfortunately that information isn't really shared, including like blending. I think that like that percentage of koji is kind of in that like kind of blending question. So I believe the Ichiko silhouette is a blend of both. I forget what the exact percentage is. But if in terms of like if you have very specific questions about a product, then certainly ask your distributor if you can. If not, you can always send an email to the JSS. If you go to shochu.guide, that's the JSS official website. So they try to put as much information out there that they can get, but unfortunately, a lot of that information producers don't want to share. So it's their secret. So if they're willing to share it, then certainly we'll try to get that information out there. And if you have a specific question about a product, you can try emailing to ask, and we'll try to get you that answer. But there isn't too much information about that out there. Okay, so next question was, what's the best way to approach understanding koji? So somebody who's brand new to the ingredient. Um, so watch the longer video that goes more in depth into this. But real quickly, historically, there was yellow koji, which is the koji that's used in sake as well. And that yellow koji, a mutation of it is black koji. Black koji, the big thing that's different about it is that it produces citric acid. And that acidity would make it like you can't just drink it straight. So if you were to take rice, add yellow koji to it, do a fermentation, and strain it away, you get sake. But the black koji adds a whole bunch of citric acid, like 6% citric acid, so like as much as lemon acid. So you can't drink it because it's just too sour. So it is specifically used in shochu making because once you do the distillation, the acid doesn't come through. Um, Black koji is that citric acid koji. So then from that, a more modern mutation is white koji. And when you compare the black and white koji, the black koji is like stronger, more robust flavor, has much more of an obvious nose. The white koji is lighter and tends to produce more of a floral nose. So broadly speaking, the black koji tends to be used mostly in the atmospheric distillation because you want that richer flavor. And if you're going to do the atmospheric distillation, if you use a white koji, you get more of those floral notes. So that's kind of the big difference. The yellow koji is that older style of koji. I find that it has a more sweeter rounderness to it. So it has like a similar texture to the black koji, but it isn't as pungent. I don't know. So Ron, how would if somebody said, what's the taste difference between black, yellow, and white koji? How would you describe the difference in koji types?
As shochu.
In yeah, for sure too.
Yeah. So the black koji, I think, is wild, like really like a strong. How can I say? Yeah, the kind of, I don't know, is it correct or not, but aggressive flavor. And what koji is actually is most of shochu distillery using it. So it's more like a light and then like calm and easy going. That's what I thought. But yeah, black is kind of rough, and some of the black koji is maybe like similar to mezcal, could be, and especially black koji is in sweet potato shochu. So and also the I don't know this time that you guys use it. Awamori is mostly black koji anyway. So again, it's really aggressive and really rough, but it's actually, if you're making cocktail with it, it's actually like, strong flavor and a strong flavor together. That's the kind of easy way to um uh kind of making process for the cocktails as well. Yeah.
Yeah, if I had to just kind of sum it up into like one example for black koji, I would
Mm.
say it's funky in the way
Funky.
that
Yeah.
when you think about like a funky cheese, like so if you think of like two different bries, one is like really mild and one is funky. The funky one is the black koji, and the mild one is white koji. That's how I would describe it.
Hmm.
Okay, so another question is, do you have any good links or sources to study Japanese art genres, periods, or styles? So I don't know, Soran, do you have any suggestions for websites or books? What would you suggest people look
No,
at?
we always look at the kind of, so we used to do every month different color cocktails. So start with the uh April, whatever, and then it's sakura cherry blossom season. So we started with the kind of pink color, and then we just started with pink arts, and then if it's the Japanese artists, they're making like a really like not a really like pink, but a really cherry blossom pink. Okay, maybe you can use that this cocktail for this. So It's actually really hard, but we are always looking at the website about those characters are. I mean, sorry, arts. Yeah, from
Yeah, I would say
research.
that so the two things. One is the direct answer to your question, which is in the U.S., most major cities have some kind of Asian art museum. So,
Mm,
like for example, in Los Angeles, in Little Tokyo, there is a Japanese art museum, and they do all sorts of things, not just like traditional Japanese art, and they do a lot of more contemporary stuff, including a lot of stuff that happens in the U.S. But if you look at their past catalogs of what they've done, I mean, that's an obvious place to start. If you want to look for more of that kind of like what are the like considered the masterpieces of, if you look at a traditional institutes like the Metropolitan Museum in New York, the Met, they obviously have an entire wing of Japanese art, so you can kind of see like what was collected by the Met, and maybe they have this artist, but that artist may produce thousands of other works. So find something that you're like, maybe it's not this particular art from but you're like, okay, I like this medium, whether it's woodblock printing or whatever, and then you're like, okay, well, what else did this person do? And then that's kind of the way I would suggest looking for it. But the thing that I would really suggest you do that is kind of the side branch to your question is for the purpose of the competition, I would suggest you look for what you're interested in, because the point isn't for you to go out there and find the most obscure artist that no one's heard of, right? The point is for you to create something. So it, you need to go out there and experience something and be inspired by it, and then come and translate that into a cocktail and share and how you were inspired. So if you're already into anime, then go into anime. If you're already into like, you know, black and white cinema, go watch a bunch of Kurosawa movies. Like there must be something you already like. If you like graffiti art, there's tons of Japanese graffiti artists, right? So find the thing that you already are interested in and find who's doing that, in the world of Japanese art. Or and you can look at that with a wider lens. It doesn't have to be just visual art. Maybe we'll take a quick break, as part of this question, and look at our examples of people that we suggested before we come back to the rest of this question. So let me go back to this presentation, and so Soran, you suggested a number of artists in particular. So I'm just
yes.
gonna kind of go through them in order. Is there anything
Yeah.
you want to say specifically about any of these people?
So the reason why I choose these artists is those guys are kind of the of course a famous artist, and they had a lots of color in it. That's why I'm using so I was talking about the color cocktails are we inspiration from those artists. And also this is really easy to understand, like because it's famous everything in Japan. And also um mostly if you know about arts is as most of the kind of we like they heard about it before, so that's why it's the easy to understand. um yeah, if it's the kind of those two tigers, I mean not tigers, but we kind of inspiration from color, and also two types of tigers. So we should use in two different types of spirits as well. It's sort of the kind of behind the scene, and then why they make it, and also the if it's a drawing, we try to kind of copy those drawing as well. So that's why I choose those the people's. Yeah.
And I would suggest for those of you that are looking deeper into this, um, like this as an example, like don't just look at the piece, research more deeply about the cultural significance
Mm,
of the thing. So these two like kind of tigers, you'll often see them at the entrances to temples. So you'll see like one on each side of like a temple gate. One of them will be holding like a ball in its mouth, and its mouth is open, and one of its mouth is closed. And the significance of that is the like that's the ah mm. And so for those of you that do yoga and you do the Om, it's actually a it's like an open mouth to closed mouth. And that's what those temple guardians are doing. And it represents this, this kind of more philosophical, like, besides just being like kind of like guardian deities, like, they're giving you this universal truth, about like, that can be encompassed by like the idea of like Om, right? So look more deeply because there's a lot in it. And it's not just like, oh, this is like a cool looking painting, right? There is a cultural reason why it's a cool painting. So I went to kind of a lot of other different places of just things that have inspired me to make you think of not just visual art. So obviously within the anime world, if you want to talk about like, capital A art that's as close to Pixar, there's Hayao Miyazaki and his studio Ghibli. Most of you probably heard of Totoro or Spirited Away. Uh, it is something that has inspired me in cocktails, and not just cocktails, but even in cocktail tools. So many of you, I'm sure, have purchased things from Cocktail Kingdom. I used to be the head product designer there. If you've bought the shaker set, you'll notice that the shakers are called Koriko tins. The reason why it's called Koriko is that so when you shake a drink, you're making it cold. So Koriko is like it both as a name, it could be like the name of a girl. Ko is a diminutive that you usually add to make something like kind of more cute and diminutive as far as names go. So you'll often find many Japanese girls and women have a name that ends in ko. Kori is like it's what is it? Ice. So the idea of like a shaker being this like diminutive ice thing, but it also is the name of the city that in Kiki's delivery service that Kiki moves to. So, in the naming of this random cocktail tool, when I was working for Cocktail Kingdom, I decided to name it after a city from one of Miyazaki's movies. So a random deep cut of it being inspired by Japanese art in a way that you probably didn't think about and didn't know. Um, this is a Japanese director, amazing guy. Controversially, maybe was murdered by the Yakuza? Question mark. Um, but his most famous film probably is Tampopo. It is a spaghetti western that is about making the perfect bowl of ramen. If you are interested in food and Japanese food in particular, and ramen even more in particular, but could be just food in general, this is one of the great food movies out there. Like you should watch this movie. This is an amazing movie. It's a bunch of different vignettes that are loosely tied together in this story about making this perfect bowl of ramen. Uh, an amazing film. In the literature side of things, Haruki Murakami, a contemporary novelist, he's still producing works. He's pretty much won every award in Japan. Um, really has an interesting voice. A lot of people in Japan felt like his writing was translated from English into Japanese because it doesn't follow a more traditional Japanese like kind of like pacing and flow of language. Um, he interestingly also is a translator. He translated all of Raymond Carver's work from English into Japanese. But his protagonists, they tend to be male protagonists who came of age in the 70s and 80s to the 90s and are often influenced by art, including music, Western art and music, and often go to bars, jazz bars. And he himself actually owned a jazz bar. And if you're looking for a specific book that's on the short side, south of the border, west of the sun, includes a couple of vignettes about the feeling of kind of like that ennui of like going to a jazz bar. It's a pretty interesting guy. Um, there's so much in Japanese music, but just to kind of throw you a weird one, baby metal, in just the way that only Japan can do. It is a mix of the hardest of hardcore metal with the like cutest of cute Japanese. It's these three, young Japanese women who are like super hardcore, like a metal band. If you've never heard of them before, check them out. They are super interesting. Japanese music is such an interesting world to dive into. Whatever you're interested in whatever genre, country, there's somebody doing it in Japan in their own way. It's a rabbit hole that I suggest everyone get into at some point. And then just to round things out, Kengo Kuma is a contemporary architect, and this is a Starbucks that he designed. Uh, can you imagine if you could get someone like this to design your bar? It's such an interesting use of modern architecture, kind of that brutalism of concrete, but also the warm wood from traditional Japanese houses. So it's the traditional kind of like farmhouse beams, but then in this very modern context, down this very long hallway that's a Starbucks. I wish my local Starbucks looked like this. So here's a just a hodgepodge of artists that we recommend that if you want to start looking into, and then just certainly find your own inspiration in terms of what is going to inspire you to make a cocktail. So next question related is the art we're drawing inspiration from strictly originating in Japan? Can we to cross over country of origin? Absolutely not. It has to be Japan. We're not allowed to cross over to another country. The point of this is that we are using a Japanese spirit. It can only be made in Japan. We want you to use a Japanese artist. If you want to be inspired by other artists, please do it for your own bars. But and certainly you can submit something, but you will not win the competition if you use a non-Japanese art. Next question: is there an unfiltered shochu that is your favorite? Um, Soran, can you even think of an unfiltered shochu? Most shochus are filtered.
But Shinshu is a new shochu is unfiltered.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
So
available in the U.S.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's it's
Not
tough.
available US.
Yeah,
Ah,
that's the Chicago from JSS who arranged this. That's the voice of God that you just heard.
the voice.
Um, the yeah, most shochu is filtered, but it's a distilled product, so the distillation itself is kind of a filtering. The last filtering step usually just removes small particulates. It They don't go through the same kind of like really hard chill filtration that the American whiskeys, as an example, go through. Some do, especially the spirits on the lighter side. So the vacuum distilled white koji shochus tend to be the ones that go through a chill filtration because you're already trying to make a light product. But obviously, if you're trying to make a super rich product, you wouldn't want it to go through chill filtration. So they still usually go through like a cellulose filter just to remove particulates. So it's not a thing that I would say differentiates shochus all that much. Um, let's see, other questions. Do you know of any companies making liqueurs using shochus? Uh, is it a base used in other products? So, Soran, I mean, you use a lot of flavored shochus and other, like, besides liqueurs, is there other things that people are using shochu for?
Um, I'm thinking, yeah, I think that we use it quite a lot different types of liqueur. And also like yeah, I just
Because
look at it. Sorry. No.
it's also like a common home infusion, right? So, like, people make like their own liqueurs at home using fruit and shochu.
Yeah, there's like a plum wine.
Yeah, making like their own
Yeah,
umeshu and
they should. Yeah, they do that. Especially I taste the okay, sweet potato shochu with the plum wine is really good.
mhm.
But yeah, we I use so many different types of liqueur, and but it's quite hard to tell same liqueur base. Yeah, only I think plum wine can get that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ingredients that you can use in shochu where
Mm.
because it's a kind of a unique ingredient, it almost feels like a what is it a liqueur. So like if the tea shochus kind of tend to feel more like a liqueur.
Hmm.
Um, I think in the US, the one that comes to mind is Mizu as a brand makes a bunch of different flavored
Yeah.
shochu like distillates. So I would look into that. But again, it's so hard because a lot of it isn't available in the US.
Mm.
I mean, there's like seaweed shochu. There was that amazing red shiso one that we had at Sengetsu. Do you remember that? There was
Mm.
like sort of
Yeah,
pink
yeah,
one.
yeah.
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 Yeah, this
So
one is available for mutual trading.
oh, so yeah,
Mm.
so I forget the name of it. We can look it up. It's it's made by the Sengetsu Distillery. They're the ones who also make the the Mugen wood aged rice shochu. But they make it's bright like red pink. It's a red shiso infusion that is it's so delicious. Has a bright acidity to it. And so if MTC carries that and you have a mutual trading company as a distributor in your area, certainly definitely look into that. Next question. When working with lower proof alcohol, is it more effective to use a syrup than an infusion to impart flavor? What are some of the alternatives you can do to not impart sweet every time? Hmm. More effective. I mean, I don't really understand the question in terms of specifically with lower proof alcohol, but in general, when we think about about any cocktail, right? There's a base spirit, and then usually there's like one or two modifiers. So, your opportunities to inject flavor is at any of those steps. So you can, add flavor to the base spirit. So that could be an infusion. You can add flavor, in the sweet of it. You can add flavor in the acid component of it, or you can add flavor in some other modifier, whether it's a spirit modifier or like in bitters. So you could add flavor any one of those steps. Um, you know, I mean, you can, I guess, making a syrup is maybe the easiest way for most people to make their own like homemade ingredient. But you can certainly make your own infusion and use it in a small amount and not have it be the base thing. So just think of it like making bitters. So if you wanted to add a specific herbal note, let's say I really wanted to have oregano as the flavor, you could take Everclear and do a crazy oregano infusion and use 2 drops of it in a thing like bitters. So you don't have to use sugar as the carrier. Are there any other infusions that you do, Saran, that's not a syrup kind of infusion? Soran, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Is there any ingredients that you guys create at your bar that's not a syrup? So any like other is it whether it's an alcohol infusion or maybe like a do you make your own kind of juices or something or bitters?
Mm, we probably do the infusion instead of all the stuff, I guess. But we always using like kind of the sweet side is liqueur, low ABV
Hmm.
liqueur. That's easy to mix with because and then you just added a citrus to balance it. But mostly we kind of add in yeah, liqueur or just sorry, not blended, but infused with the shochu. Yeah,
When you do a alcohol infusion for shochu, would you
yeah.
suggest only using genshu, or do you think that using a low proof is okay as well? Like, do you do
I
any low proof infusions?
I think if you want to add it like flavor, I think we can. I'm not sure we've done before, but no, I can't really tell right now. But I think we did the um oil oil. We
Yeah.
did some flavor infused, kind of instant infused, like what we do, like for example, lemongrass, like a
Hmm.
frozen lemongrass, just chopped into the spirits and then just blend it That's it. And then just strain it. And then you can get that kind of lemongrass flavor spirits. And I think that works with the shochu as well because shochu has kind of similar kind of maybe like a rice or sweet potato. It works with that anyway. Yeah. Sort of kind of instant infusion would be works with the shochu.
It just occurred to me that the obvious thing that you do is you make teas. Like teas are
Yeah,
infusions, right? So
easy,
and
easy. Yeah.
yeah, so I guess even the lemongrass you can think of as like making like a tea, right? So yeah, that's an easy answer. Make different
Mm.
kinds of teas for low proof infusions. That's not particularly sweet. All right. So from both of your experiences using shochu, do you prefer making more spirit forward or a cocktail that's more balanced? Shochu's more subtle. So this is a preference. Soran, I mean,
Mm.
do you prefer a more spirit forward or do you prefer a lighter?
I don't know. Why did I say I don't know? Because my taste is actually more balanced because I'm always tell my staff is try to make easy to understand and then it's really delicious drink.
Yeah,
So that's what's the same as shochu as well. Like shochu flavor have, but is if it's a high proof, it's if it's a really delicious drink, it's fine. But I think I will be like one drink finish, and then I don't want to drink again. But if
yeah,
it's really low ABV or balance it, I mean, not I'm saying the low ABV, but it's actually really fit the alcohol percentage with the shochu. I think the balance is much more important for that.
yeah. I find that for me personally, the drinks I like to drink are the lighter drinks. And
Yes,
maybe
yes,
that's just
sorry.
because I'm old now.
Yeah, me
And
too.
yeah, I want less longer rather than
Mm,
a whole bunch up front. But in terms of the cocktails I make, I personally love the old fashioned as a format
mm,
because to me it's kind of like a haiku. It's like because there's so few ingredients, like everything is like you can't hide. Like everything has to be perfect, has to perfectly balance and like make the maximum impact. So
mhm.
I personally like that format, but it's probably not what I would order myself to drink. So personal preference. So another
Yeah.
preference question: what's better, a cocktail where you can taste each ingredient, or where all the flavors blend together? I don't know. So, Ron, what do you prefer?
I prefer the flavor blended together
Yeah.
because this is my kind of logic or like philosophy of how to make cocktails. Once I started doing kind of a color so art cocktail with it, is there's so many colors, but they if you transform to the taste, so like you just mix with lots of different colors and then just one actual color. So we actually we I mean I would do like this taste as color and the taste which mixed together will be really nice color and also like really tasty drink. That's my kind of philosophy over my I'm always picking up the color taste is kind of equal.
Mhm.
Yeah, does it make sense? Sorry, I was just
Yeah, it makes sense. I would say
yeah.
that like I'm similar in that I want it to come together. The word that I think of is it's a the German word Gestalt. I
Hmm.
want something to be more than the sum of its parts. So I
Mm,
enjoy tasting the parts, but when you put it together, like it has to become more than just the pieces, right?
yeah.
Like, and the problem I think though, to use your color analogy, is that like sometimes, like as an example, if you mix like I don't know, like a white and a blue, you get a light
Mm,
blue, right? You
mm,
add a little green, and it's like oh, it becomes a little bit more turquoise. So now it's
mhm.
become something new. But if you just keep adding too much, it just becomes like muddy brown.
That's true.
So like you can't add too much. You gotta use less and then actually become something new, right?
And
That's what I
also,
would say.
yeah, and also there's definitely like supplies as well. So that's a really good sign of kind of mixed with the ingredients. Like if you taste all ingredients as it, which is okay, and I know because there's put on the menu anyway. But
Yeah.
are these ingredients and these ingredients together? Wow, that's a really unique flavor came up. That's just kind of surprise as well. So, and also I really blended it really nice. I mean, blended together is good. Better. That's what I thought.
Hmm. All right. So next question: are we allowed to use Maya wari or any kind of wari style in the
Um,
competition? If I remember correctly, the blank wari cocktails were not allowed in the competition last year. So the style is allowed, but if you literally come with just shochu and hot water, you will lose. Right? So if you come with just shochu and water, not going to work. If you use shochu and some kind of, let's say, a tea as an example, and it somehow becomes more than the sum of its parts and has some kind of inspiration, then great. So it can be in the style of an oyuwari, but it can't be just an oyuwari, if that makes sense. Uh, let's see. Any tips for shochu hunting as we peruse our local liquor stores? I would say you're not going to be able to do it at a liquor store unless you have a amazing liquor store. Like if you're in New York, like Astor Wines, as an example, has a fairly decent selection, but even they don't have a lot. So I would say your best bet is to um, go to your local Japanese restaurant or bar that has a lot and just try what they already have in stock, and then reach out to all of your distributors to find out what they have. And then if you have any like local experts that may know, like, hey, here's what is and is not available, because it's like I said, it's not just what is available, it's also what can you literally get. So you might not be able to get it. The other thing though is that you may not be able to get it for your bar, but you may be able to order it through the mail to try something and to experiment. So if there, because you may not be able to resell it from a legal standpoint, but if you're curious about like what does a black koji, made with sweet potato taste like, and you can't get it locally, and you want to know, you can always order through the mail. So you can always look online. Yes, someone confirms Ichigo Silhouette is a combination of atmospheric and vacuum distillation. That is an example of not a question, but a comment. What is the average price point for shochu in your market or region? Uh, I mean, it's unfortunately too expensive because it's an import product. Um, but that's going to be different for everybody. The crazy thing is, in Japan, it is dirt cheap in Kyushu. Um, like the most like unobtainium, like it just came off the still in like 10 hours. It won't taste the same anymore. Like, like Hanatare, like ridiculousness is like under $20. It's like it's just not fair if you go to Kyushu. In the US, if you were to sell that, like first of all, you wouldn't be able to bring it unless you like imported it in a 0 degree freezer, but like it would sell for like 150 to $200. It's ridiculous. But so thinking about farm to fork or farm to glass, what vegetables are paired best with shochu? So Ron, do you have a vegetable shochu pairing?
to be honest, I haven't done it before, but so yeah, the vegetable. What have I done? Sorry, I was just thinking about, but cannot really get the answers right now. Um,
So the obvious one, and the one that Phil Ward did at the seminar that the two of us did was he did a shochu and
Chisel.
shiso.
Yeah,
So
yeah, 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 yeah.
but shiso kind of works with everything. Shiso is like the
True.
mint, like it just works with everything.
Mm.
Mint and works with shochu just like it works with anything else. Um,
I never done that before, but I used to do like white radish with gin. So maybe
yeah,
that if you find out kind of gin flavor, which is botanical flavor into the shochu, if you find that, I think it works with the white radish. Even though I think it's carrots as well. I think it's you bake the carrots stuff like that. I think it's the similar. It's the kind of because it's sweet potato is actually kind of same root stuff, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Carrot
maybe
is
that those
is hard because
is it?
it. So we tried to do so many different kinds of carrot cocktails at existing conditions, but the quality of the carrot changes so
Ah,
much. So even from the same farmer, like between the beginning of the season and the end of the season, that
right.
it the amount of sugar and the flavor changes. So like we could never make a cocktail for the menu. We could do like a one-off special because like whatever we
Mm,
juice that day, we could make it right, but we couldn't make one that was consistent ever. That was carrot was real tough.
hmm.
Um, I feel like if there was like a flavor mascot for our trip this year or last year, it was probably yuzu kosho, right?
Ah,
As a flavor. It's like a yuzu and pepper condiment. It's salty, so I would not suggest using that directly as an ingredient because it's very salty. But as a flavor idea,
mm,
um, I think the most surprising pairing for me, just in general, was food and shochu go so well together. And people think, oh, I'm having sushi, I need sake, and certainly flavor-wise is delicious, but especially with the oilier fishes and oilier things like meat, shochu because it's higher ABV, like cuts through the fat. And so any food, especially fatty foods, shochu I
mm.
find works better than sake does as a food pairing. And there was that we went to a shabu shabu restaurant, and the broth at the end of shabu shabu, that as an oyuwari with shochu was amazing. I don't know if
Nah,
you tried that at the end of that meal.
I didn't do that.
Yeah,
That's I just like really I haven't done it. No, I haven't done it.
yeah, vegetable broth and as an oyuwari
Mhm.
is delicious. Okay. Any resources for finding seasonality of Japanese cuisine ingredients and colors? I mean, there's an entire cuisine in Japan that's dedicated to that called kaiseki, which is all about colors and seasons. Can you think of any special resource like website or book for learning about Japanese cuisine and seasonality, ingredients, colors?
Mm.
Soren?
Probably it's Japanese Culinary Academy. They have a website. They have all Japanese kaiseki cuisine technique. It's all resources available, free downloaded.
Oh, that's amazing. I gotta look at that website. I've never seen that.
Okay.
Does the art have to be visual, or would a haiku haiban be acceptable? Yeah, poetry certainly is art. You're gonna have to read the poem, so be prepared to perform the poetry if you're gonna to do it. If you do a novel or a movie, you're gonna have to describe it. So be prepared to back up your artwork. Um, Next question: for custom ingredients, just syrups. Besides being replicable, is there anything else to be considered from a judging perspective? It needs to be obviously replicable. You probably want to be able to travel to the finals if you make it to the finals with it. Certainly, you can make it once you get here, but in general, in competitions, I suggest you try to travel with all your ingredients. Uh, don't use anything illegal. Don't do anything stupid. Don't make a nicotine infusion. That'll kill people. Don't use activated charcoal. Like, be safe. Um, Parameters for Japanese artists. So obviously native born, definitely Japanese. I would say they have to be in Japan when they produce the work. So like certainly they can leave Japan and produce a work somewhere else, but they need to be a resident of Japan. If you can make a strong case of somebody who is an expat living in Japan, has been there long enough, and is doing Japanese art, has adopted the form, then you can make that argument, but it's got to pass the sniff test, right? So if you pick, you know, somebody who went to Japan once and came back to wherever they live and produced the thing, that's not going to work. Can they be of Japanese heritage? For the purpose of this competition, no. They have to be a Japanese resident making art in Japan. They can travel outside of Japan occasionally. If it's architecture, maybe it's built somewhere else, but they need to be a Japanese artist in Japan. And that's just to limit the scope of this. Let's see. Am I outside? I have a black sheet behind me. Question about koi shisu.
That's one that
Referring.
we talked about red shiso liqueur.
Yeah.
Koi shiso.
Okay. Somebody's using that in a bar in Pennsylvania. And what level of direct reference to a property is acceptable? If, for instance, reference a specific album. Uh, so, if we're talking about music, an album is an entire thing, a body of work as one work. So, an album would certainly work. If you were to use what is it, Hokusai as an example, you could use his the one specific what is it uh block printing of the wave that everyone knows, but this is one block in a series of block printings of Mount Fuji. So it could be, you could use that as a body of work. But if you were to say you're going to take all of Hokusai's work throughout his entire lifetime, that'd be too broad. So if it is a, a definitive edition, a collection of work as intended by the artist, then yes. So in that same way, if a musician collects a body of work as an album, yes, it could also be just one song, or it could be a body of work. So it could be a book, it could be a poem, it could be a book of poetry, but it has to be the intent of the artist for it to be a thing. So you could pick some kind of architecture where it is a larger garden and building, or you can pick just the building or just the garden. But if they intended it to go together, it can be a combined thing, if that makes sense. Uh, let's see. Homemade ingredient, the number of ingredients, it's in the competition rules. Look in the specific rules for what is and is not allowed. Um, what bars in the U.S. are known for shochu collections and cocktails? I mean, certainly there are many Japanese bars or Japanese-owned bars in New York City. So Kenta's bars, what is it? Blanking on everyone's name. Masa's bar, Katana Kitten. Um, what is it? There's the old angel share, the new angel share. There's
The Takuma
the
Martini.
Martini, yeah, Takuma's bar. Outside of New York, I'm less familiar of specifically Japanese bar. There's certainly a lot of Asian American bartenders who have used shochu in drinks. So specifically, like from past years' competitors, there's lots of previous winners who have used shochu in cocktails at their bars. In LA, I can specifically think of what is the something Tiger in Echo Park. Uh, there's a bartender named Tony there who does shochu cocktails. There's the Daijobu pop-up series in Texas, where Sharon and Care do shochu cocktails. I mean, I would say your best bet is to look at past finalists of the Shochu Cocktail Competition. That's probably the easiest way to find it. And then if you follow the JSS Instagram, they will often post photos and recipes of shochu cocktails. So that's an easy way to find it. There's a American bartender in Japan, Chris Pellegrini. He's based in Tokyo, but he does a podcast about shochu and is involved in I guess technically exporting because he's in Japan, a shochu to the U.S. And the other thing is you can ask your distributors. You're looking for shochu, ask your distributors, hey, who's buying this stuff, right? I want to go to their bars and try it. So that may be the easiest way for you locally to find it. Um, let's see. Can the drink be inspired by an entire movement? Uh, I mean, I'm not going to say no, but you're going to be really hard pressed to convince me how the specific drink can encompass the entire movement. I mean, again, if that's a hill you want to die on, by all means, but if you're going to try to win a contest, that's not the move I would make. Uh, I would tie it to a specific thing so that the judges understand what you are doing. Um, yeah. All right. I think that's all the questions we've got so far. Soran, I've kept you for such a long time. I didn't even get to my questions I had for you. Is there
Yeah,
anything you feel like we need to talk about that like I
yeah.
didn't ask you that you felt was important that people should know?
Sorry again.
So, you saw the questions I sent you in advance of like,
Yeah,
here's
yeah.
the questions I think that's interesting that I want to get out of you. Is there anything from there
Um,
where you're like, oh, this is something that people should know that will help them in their career, in this competition about Shochu?
oh,そうね. It's kind of, well, I think that was me and Don was talking about something about in process of cocktails. And then one of the questions you said that do you have any tips and suggestions beyond the base Mr. Potato Head method method of something ingredients in classic recipe or that's quite nice question. As always, I really um yeah think about it. So
Yeah. Okay. So the question is,
yeah,
so many people they tend to use the Mr. Potato Head method, right? So you take the basic ratio of like here's a sour, it's like two, three quarter, three quarter. I'm just going to substitute this for something else. So I take a daiquiri and instead of rum, I use shochu.
yeah.
Bam, I have a shochu daiquiri. Like kind of boring, right? So how do you break out of that? Because like the example of the drink that you showed us, right? It really doesn't follow a normal classic
Mhm.
ratio, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think about that? How do you come up with something like this?
It's just kind of one with I try to make one thing which is the cocktail basic and then basic cocktail base and then also flavorful what flavor mixed with the cocktail is I think it's banana and then I need a kind of bitterness so that trying to make it two bitterness from Blanca and also oolong tea. And oolong tea actually tannins actually, but those are kind of mixed with the sweetness side. It's kind of make a balance. That's why I made the kind of stuff. But basically, it's actual like the Negroni Swiss. That's my thing. Yeah.
So I do something that is not normal. I will break down a cocktail mathematically. So, if I were to take like the Negroni as an example, I would be like, okay, so let's say it's just equal parts 111. So then I have 40 proof, and then I have the proof of the Campari, and then I have, like this is how much water I'm adding. Here's the proof of the vermouth. And then at the end, I'm like, okay, I have a total volume of 4 ounces, and of that, it needs to be, like whatever the proof, here's whatever the sugar is, here's whatever else is in there. Now that becomes the formula or ratio for anything. So I could take a daiquiri and I could turn it into a Negroni by adjusting it and turning the same ratios into a Negroni ratio. So it's a counterintuitive way of thinking, but it's a way that you could take any combination of ingredients and turn it into a kind of cocktail. So this is the same way that Dave Arnold works. If you read Liquid Intelligence, it's essentially what he's alluding to when he talks about the cocktail families, and he talks about like the acidity and the amount of sugar in different ingredients. And if you really break it down, you can you can not only do it by taste. So the way most of us work is that we make a recipe and then you're like, okay, this is too sweet, this is too sour. I adjust it. But you can also do it by math. So that's the crazy way of doing it. But yeah, I think the taking it from the ingredient like you're doing and then just trying to follow it is it's that's hard for me. I don't know how you do it. I think the math is easier for me.
I don't know. It's just I like those kind of flavor matching. So,
Mhm.
and also that's the and also those spirits and a liqueur. I'm trying to same color, and then it just means that the taste kind of similarized anyway. But sometimes I'm doing the different color into the cocktail, and then it gets a really different flavor came up. So this is interesting. But I'm trying to like exactly, not exactly, but same area of color put it together, and then that's because the shochu has aging, so it has the brown flavor, brown color, and liqueur, I mean cocktail de liqueur is a brown color, fen blanca. I'm sorry, the oolong tea brown color. So the kind of color size, I'm trying to pick it up all together, and then just adjustments to how to balance it to taste. That's kind of my stuff. Well, yeah.
All right. So we've kept you for much longer than we intended to. It is very early in the morning for you, so we're going to let you go. If anyone
Yeah.
has any further questions, here's our contact on the various socials. In terms of the competition details, they should all be on the website now. The finals are going to be in New York. They're in May. Chicago, can you confirm the date of the finals? Uh,
Okay, it's gonna be March
oh, so
7th.
March 7th.
Oh
So
no,
that
I'm
is the
sorry, 10, 10. I'm sorry.
March 10th is the
Yeah.
date of the finals in New York. And last couple of questions, other resources. The Chris Pellegrini podcast on Shochu, I think, is probably a good one. Various distributors have better or worse websites about different Shochus. Unfortunately, there isn't anything else great out there that I would say, like, this is the one place you can go. And then last question in general, can low alcohol cocktails work in North America for customers? Yes, it is probably the next trend. It's a thing that everyone is writing about, whether it's liquor.com or Punch. Everyone's talking about low ABV cocktails and no ABV cocktails. If you aren't making them yet, you're already late. How do you feel about adding a neutral spirit like vodka to add to shochu? I would say you're missing the point. You want to make something that tastes like shochu with shochu. Why would you add something that makes it taste like vodka? Um, I
But
don't think you're going to make a cocktail better by adding just ethanol. You can make it different by using a different spirit, but I don't think that the ABV is what's making the drink worse. Soran, do you have any thoughts?
I was thinking like if you add in so that kind of making different flavor. I mean higher volume alcohol. I just added a little bit of the fruits brandy is nice with the kind of works together. Which is the Julia does. She did the kind of just slightly little different types the fruits brandy adding the flavor. So that's kind of interesting. And also you can add a little bit of high volume of alcohol. Yeah, I'm kind of same as Don said that because the it's not point of just adding this high proof spirits into the drink. I mean with shochu. So let's try like a play around with the shochu, and then you probably like find out it's a really good matching with a liqueur or a brandy or tea, or there's so many stuff you can play around because this is kind of new for you guys anyway. So that's um just yeah, just play, and then you find a really right way to the flavor combine together as well.
Yeah, make a delicious drink, and
Hmm.
it's not about the ABV. It's about the flavor. It's about the combination of flavors. You're not going to win or lose a competition because you had a low or high ABV drink. It's going to be because the whole thing is the winning drink. Because everyone wants to drink another one. As you said, at the end of the day, you want a drink where you finish it and you're like, give me another, right? That's the drink that's going to win.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for coming. If you have any other questions, please reach out to us, reach out to Chicago, reach out to JSS. Good luck to anyone who's competing. If we see you in New York, I'm excited to try your drinks. So thank you all for coming.
And we have another seminar for next week on
Monday. Yeah. We have another seminar next week. So more Shochu Cocktail information coming at you. Please join us again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Soran-san. So sorry.
That's okay. It's 3 a.m. here, but
thank you so much. Thank you for everyone. Bye-bye. Good night, Soran-san. Bye-bye, Don-san. Pretty good, Don. Thank you. Oh, I don't know why it's...